And regardless of what it might cause, I think that even if it meant the collapse of the DA, I think they should still take it, because an ANC EFF coalition is so terrifying that I think that it would be heroic of the DA to take one for the team.
Can South Africa's coalitions of chaos be stabilized? And what does the volatility at the local government level suggest about the viability of coalitions in 2024 at the provincial and national level? This is a question that I would like to discuss with Nicholas Woode-Smith. He is a fiction writer as well as a political analyst based in Cape Town. Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Nicholas, what are some of your observations about the current state of coalition politics in South Africa at the moment?
I used to be quite optimistic about coalitions with smaller parties in the DA, but over the last year, I found that smaller parties have proven to be too opportunistic, too spiteful towards the DA, too willing to go into corrupt deals with the ANC and the EFF, and just too chaotic and diverse in the worst possible way to be able to work together in coalitions as far as we've seen.
Okay, so you're pinning a lot of the blame of this volatility on some of these small parties. So if you think of Gayton Mackenzie's Patriotic Alliance, they have a very transactional approach to these things. You know, one day they're in the kind of opposition coalition, the next they're brokering deals with the ANC. Seems very transactional. Exactly. So, you know, do you think that that's the only problem here, or what about the relations between the bigger parties as well?
I think the DA has some parts to blame. They are a big party. They're used to being the coalition leader, so they can be domineering. They can be, as a lot of smaller parties have said, they can be a bully. But I also think that they also are the majority members of these coalitions. So I think a lot of smaller parties don't really realize they're a one-seat party. They represent a one-seat worth of voters. And even then, they are betraying the mandates of those one-seat of voters, because those voters did not vote for a party to go into and do corrupt dealings with the ANC and the EFF, as has been happening. They voted for stability. They voted for policies that would lead to prosperity in their municipalities, and that just hasn't been happening. I do believe that there has been a lot of sabotage by the larger parties, the EFF making deals with Action SA, the ANC making deals, and the allegations of bribery, and some of them were actually proven true, with the attempted impeachment of the mayor of Johannesburg. So there has been, the bigger parties have been, you know, like Cold War, Soviet Union and US brokering deals to try to foment more chaos within these coalitions.
Okay, but all of this volatility doesn't bode well for service delivery. You know, ratepayers are probably scratching their heads, wondering, you know, more about prosaic things like filling potholes and storm water drains being unblocked. Meanwhile, all of these parties continue to bicker and fight. So where do you see this all going in the run-up to 2024, Nicholas? What are some of the political ramifications?
I think that voters are losing faith in coalitions. I think that they see it as chaos. They see it as something where people are just going to bicker. If you just look at any of the people on the street, they're saying that I can't trust these parties because they're just going to fight. And the problem is, a lot of people, those are for the people who are actually paying attention that there is a coalition ruling. To a lot of normal voters, they just say, well, the DA's got the majority, so it must be a DA mayor running the city. So the city's not getting any better. So the DA is not better than the ANC. So the chaos serves anyone who doesn't like the DA, when frankly, it's not really the DA's fault that, for example, Johannesburg is not running. They are trying to secure the legislature of the municipality, when it's really the executive that matters when it comes to service delivery. And all this started with the city. So all this is basically can be surrounded by the fact that Johannesburg doesn't have a permanent city manager. The DA tried to appoint Johan Metler, who has a track record of saving municipalities, but that was torpedoed by Action SA, who wanted to appoint another city manager connected to the EFF, who also has huge allegations of corruption against him. So it's kind of just been in flux. So effectively, Johannesburg has been a store without a manager at the moment, just having a bunch of employees running around, not knowing what they're doing, and well, people are throwing bricks through the glass.
Okay, and Johan Metler used to be the city manager in Nelson Mandela Bay under Athol Trollip. And then after the failure of his appointment to the city of Joburg, he's now actually at the city of Tshwane. So the coalition there has snapped him up. So he's clearly a man in demand. All right. So now what about national politics, Nicholas? I mean, you might think that the electorate is going to be fed up with coalitions, but if the ANC drops below 50%, then we're going to have coalitions one way or another. Just depends on what type of coalitions, whether it's with some rats and mice parties or with the EFF or the broader opposition coming together and forcing the ANC out. That will require quite a lot of careful management of all of these egos and so on. But, what is the prospect of an ANC EFF coalition? Are you worried about that?
So there's some multiple possibilities here. So we see on a local level that the ANC and EFF haven't really had a good track record of working together. But the main reason for this is that possibly the EFF is not a governing party. They don't like governing territories. They don't like actually doing the real practical work of public administration because they don't know how. But they are a legislative party. So it is very possible that they would be willing to go into coalition on a national level, because all that really requires is voting on laws and pushing their pie in the sky ideology around. They don't really have to administrate. But at the same time, there may be fear on part of the EFF that if they go into coalition with the ANC, they could become a part of a sinking ship. And that is a fear that I think we could see with the failed let's just call it like a coup in Ekurhuleni, that the EFF is not completely on board with the ANC, which is a surprise to me because I was viewing the EFF as basically just a disgruntled ANC splinter. Maybe they do have enough of their identity now that it might not be 100% possibility. But I still think it is on the table that they could have a coalition on a national level.
I had John Steenhuisen on this show, and I proposed a scenario to him, which is that he's standing on the floor of the IEC Results Center on election day, or the day after election day, and Cyril Ramaphosa comes up to him and says, John, I've got a problem here. The EFF wants to go into coalition. We, the ANC, are down below 50%. My colleagues are keen on this. Can you help me to get out of this kind of coalition with the EFF? And he said, John, in reply to that, said, well, we'd have to take this seriously and consider it, but it would come with some very strong caveats. That strikes me as a bit of a risk for the positioning and the image of the DA to be attached to the ANC. What do you think about that?
It'll definitely damage their branding, especially to their core voter base. But so in general, surveys of most voters, ANC voters in particular, like the idea of DA administration, but with the ANC leadership. They like the idea of, they still attach the idea of the ANC, but they just want someone who can actually do their job, which is the DA. So I think in terms of national exposure, I don't think South Africa would hate it en masse. I think a lot of DA supporters would dislike it. But I don't think it would be most of the DA supporters are actually going out and still supporting the DA. I think it's the people who have jumped ship over to the Action SA who won't like it. So I don't think it would be as bad as we think. I think it's something that depends on how the DA act within that arrangement. And regardless of what it might cause, I think that even if it meant the collapse of the DA, I think they should still take it, because an ANC EFF coalition is so terrifying that I think that it would be heroic of the DA to take one for the team and practically ruin the party just so we can have another term of not having the EFF in national power. That is how terrifying I think the EFF's policies are to this country.
Yeah, and as Steenhuisen rightly pointed out, such a deal would have to come with very strong conditions. Martin van Staden said, well, perhaps you could have a confidence and supply kind of agreement, not necessarily a formal coalition. That was him writing in the Daily Friend, which might be a bit of a safer alternative for the DA.
This basically is a coalition, but with just, as Steenhuisen said, caveats. And I think that would be the form of coalition. It has to be something that requires a lot of willpower by the DA. It can't be something like the Lib Dems in the UK where they just let the Tories do whatever they want. It has to be something where they're willing to torpedo the government if the ANC does not behave. Obviously, they have to compromise. They can't say, well, you didn't vote for this pothole bill, so therefore we're going to go out the coalition and let the EFF enter. It has to be something where completely fundamental to the running of this country. And I think the DA could, if they had that confidence and they had the willpower, they could be really good kingmakers, and they could not only keep the EFF out, they could help they could help steer this country in the right direction. Take a lot of tackling of the wheel from the ANC there.
Nicholas Woode-Smith, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. How do you think South Africa's coalition politics will play out in the coming years? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section. Also, if you enjoyed this analysis, you might want to become a client of the CRA. There's a link in the description where you can find out more information. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.